Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal moon in the fourth house. And this is the house that Cancer rules in the universal chart. It's the house of home and family. The moon is the ruler of Cancer, and so the moon is the ruler of the fourth house. So a planet is in its rightful place when it's in the house that it rules. And so this can be fortunate for the person who has this placement. Before I continue, I want to give a shout out to the astrocodex.com, where I did get my information, plus the Astrology place.com, and I think there was something else that I looked at. What I do, I could kind of wing it, I guess, if I wanted to, but I always like to get some of their ideas, some of the experts' ideas, so that I can be as thorough as possible, and yet put it in my own words, of course. So this is an aspect of astrology that takes the natal planets and adds a new layer to the onion. So the reason I'm saying this is because let's say your moon is in Aries and you read in an astrology book that the moon in Aries is very volatile emotionally. And you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to be like this, I'm going to be like that. And yet, what if you have it in the fourth house of home and family? What does that do to that Aries moon? Or let's say your moon is in Aquarius and you hear that you're just super emotionally detached. Well, I guess I should add at this point the fact that the moon is supposed to represent our emotional nature. It's our reactions to life. There isn't a universal reaction to certain events. Some people will react one way, some will react another. And this is where the moon comes in. The moon is, also what makes you feel safe, emotionally. It really is. We could kind of just say that it has to do with our emotions, our reactions to life. It also can represent our mother, and when you have the moon in the fourth house in your natal chart, your mother may have been very nurturing to you, regardless of what her sun sign was. She may have doted on you, and what can happen, I feel, in some cases, is that this can create a bit of a mama's boy or mama's girl mentality with some people who have the moon in the fourth house, where they are overly attached to their parents, especially the mother, even when they are adults. And so the classic example is the man who is kind of tied to the apron strings of his mother, and he may be a grown-ass man, as they say, and he still is very dependent on his his mother's approval, because again, we're talking about the moon in the fourth house. This is like having your moon in Cancer. Even if your moon is in Gemini or some other sign, it's going to have that sub-influence. And, because the fourth house is a water house, even if you don't have any personal planets in water, you may find that if you have planets in water houses, which would be the fourth, 8th, or 12th, and or 12th houses, that this may make you more emotional than you might originally think about yourself, and then that can make a lot of sense. Now, I feel like one of the big pieces of the moon in the fourth house is the idea of safety. And of course, we can go back to the idea of the mother kind of protecting her young. And this is also going to be how you feel, that you're very protective of others, but also wanting that for yourself, or, because you did have it. And somebody with the moon in the fourth house tends to be very sentimental. And this can make you like love schmaltzy movies and all kinds of, Hallmark cards and just the past, nostalgia. In the tarot, the Six of Cups is a card that's connected to the sign of Cancer. And one of the key words of the Six of Cups is childhood, nostalgia, sentimentality. And it can be about the good old days. So people with the moon in the fourth house of home and family, if they become immigrants, if they move to a different country, they will always hold their homeland in their hearts. Even if they have a lot of, if they're critical of where they came from, they still hold a place in their heart for their homeland. I would wager, though, that a lot of people who have this position would never speak badly about their homeland, that they would have that kind of attitude that really doesn't have logic behind it in terms of, that level of devotion. But, I guess I can understand why, because, some of these things I love as well, and I have no placements like this. So it's very interesting to hear them talk about some of these traits and not feel like I can relate to that with my own chart. But you might feel like you are very patriotic, that you love your country, warts and all, whatever your country is. And you may know that your country isn't perfect, but you respect it. You may respect the flag of your country and not want to desecrate it. And the other thing that I would tie to this placement is this idea of a body of water, because the fourth house is also your dwelling. So even as an adult, where do you want to live? What kind of real estate, if you will? And with the moon here, there's like an emotional need for that. And, I have heard people say things like that of, oh, I've got to be living by the water. Doesn't mean you have to live by some sea. It might just be like a little lake or something like that. Or maybe even a stream would be good enough. Who knows? But that just may be something that is non-negotiable for you. And if you happen to be in a location that's kind of landlocked, that doesn't have water around it, that might be something that you just don't like. I think that people like you tend to be great gift givers because you really tune into other people at a deep level. And of course, that a lot of people may know that is what an empath does, and that you're able to kind of figure out what makes people tick and therefore what kind of gift to give them that's very specific to them. But I think at the end of the day that many of you are most acclimated to your family, that this is going to be something that is the centerpiece in your life. Hey, there's a term called clannishness for the sign of Cancer. Cancer rules the fourth house of home and family where your moon is in. So clannishness means that, the people that are part of your family comprise the bulk of your social interactions. And probably your friends are going to be people from your hometown, from your earlier years in life, because you have that strong tie to the past. When somebody has the moon in the fourth house, their childhood and where they come from are very near and dear to them. And that's not abnormal. I think a lot of people feel that way, but you take it to the next level because your emotions are activated with the moon here. And this is already a water house. So it's kind of like this double emotional influence. And so if for some reason you are estranged from your family, first of all, it's going to be quite traumatic for you. Again, other people who have different moons in different houses that might suffer as well, but it might be acute within you because it goes against everything that you are about. So you take it to heart much more. These are your values. So when you cannot make it happen, it can really be painful. But what you will tend to do is I think you will make your friends part of your family, and you will treat them how you would treat your family if you were in contact with them. Or fur babies. This brings up another point about maternal longing. And actually, it's funny, I did not see anything like that was really talking about this. I mean, they talked about their own past and sentimentality. But I feel that whether you're a man or woman with the moon in the fourth house, that you will long for having your own children. And again, not everybody, finds themselves in a situation where that is possible. A good question would be, would a woman who has the moon in the fourth house ever go to a sperm bank if she didn't have a partner to conceive a child with? That's a good question, because I think that for some of you, family, or having the intact family is very important, and that you wouldn't take any shortcuts, that you wouldn't think that's a reasonable substitution. However, I would say it would depend on your sun sign. If your sun sign is in fire, or maybe even air, these are masculine signs, you might think, hey, I can do this, and perhaps it's a longing that you have, but you have other, goals as well, and you just see it as one more of your goal, yet one more goal, and tick it off your list, and not be as concerned of whether or not you have a mate or that kind of family structure for your child. Now, one of the things that they mentioned here is the idea of the ancestors. And, they talk about roots, somebody's roots. And yes, Cancer is associated with history, So just in terms of whatever your, country's history is or world history, that always fascinates Cancer because it's the past. So when I say Cancer, I know it's not your sun sign, but it is in a prominent position, so that's why I refer to it like that. And in terms of one's own family, we talk about ancestral karma, and this is something that I just became familiar with a while ago. Even on the psychotherapeutic level, you could look at it as some of the traits that are in your family tree. For instance, mental health issues, even, like that some people might consider biological, but if there's a history of addiction, which might be in that mental health area. And here we're also talking about things that have to do with, like Cancer's associated with antiques. So if you're passing down certain items, that could be something that has a lot of emotional importance to you. Heirlooms, they call them. And the other, and it's interesting, they even went as far as saying that they might be made of silver. And I was thinking, say what? Like, how could you get that specific? But I think where they're going with that is that the moon is connected to silver, because the moon, I don't know specifically, but I know that Monday is Moon Day, and that's always white or maybe silver. Okay. And I think so there must be something associated with silver and the moon, the feminine type of color, or I guess it's not really a color, is it? But also, Cancer is associated with cooking, with food. And so that kind of thing, ethnic cooking, based on the heritage, the ethnicity of either, with the parents, where did they come from? What kind of foods do they cook? So those kind of things can really make the person feel like they are connected to their roots. And the last thing I want to talk about is how a person with the moon in the fourth house deals with relationships. Okay, because this is something that is very important when you're looking at the moon sign as well as Venus, but you see how a person expresses themselves emotionally and how they deal with emotions. Now, this is something where a person with the moon in the fourth house is not going to take relationships lightly. And this is regardless of gender. So even if the person's sun sign is Gemini, if they have the moon in the fourth house, they will tend to be serious about their giving their heart to somebody. And they will probably feel that this is a very important thing to do, because some people might say, well, who says we have to give our hearts to anybody? So this is a perfect example of, somebody who does have the sun in a masculine sign, like Aquarius or Sagittarius, and yet they find that they are very sentimental and they cannot understand why. And their moon might even be in a masculine sign. And they can't understand why they're like that. Well, this is one of those kind of, we would call more hidden influences that you don't just normally see by knowing that your sun is in Aquarius and your moon is in Gemini. And you just assume that you're very detached, and yet you have that strong sentimental streak. This is one of the main reasons that I love evolutionary astrology, this idea of looking at not only the personal planets and what signs they're in, but also where are the planets in the houses and how does that impact the person's attitude towards life and their, behavior, their interests, and how can they create the life of their dreams through knowing this information. And, for me, predictions are interesting and I think they have their place, but I think in astrology, unfortunately, they're overemphasized. And I think that this kind of examination is underemphasized and that it should be much more featured, because when you are taking inspired action in the direction of your dreams, moon in the fourth house people, you are actually taking charge of your life. You're taking responsibility for your life. And that ultimately is much more empowering than waiting for a transit to come along. And, that can be icing on the cake, the transits. But I think that, we're told to know ourselves, or we must know ourselves in order to really know what we want, too. That's another thing. And that's one of the reasons why there can be, I think, too, that feeling like we understand ourselves much better when we explore these kind of subtleties, like knowing where certain personal points are in our chart. Okay, well, thanks for listening. And if you would like me to do what I'm doing here in your personal chart, please visit me at rainamoonastrology.com. The link to my online store is below in the description box. Thanks. Bye.